Going to be going over how to replace the eccentric shaft sensor on a BMW 3 Series E90. This repair includes obviously removing the valve cover. So I'm going to show you how to remove the valvetronic motor, the valve cover, to access the eccentric shaft sensor. This vehicle came in not running very well, check engine light on, and it really doesn't want to excel at all because the valvetronic sensor is not reading properly. The system can't adjust the intake valves correctly. I have some great tips on how to remove the valve cover. There's not a lot of space, so I'm going to show you how to do that with minimal effort. Just want to also mention that you can check out my website, www.bmwdiy.com, and if you have questions on diagnosis or about your BMW, you can contact me through my website. I always like to do a quick look over of the vehicle, anything that I'm going to be working on. First thing I notice is that this is detached. A lot of times these crack just from age and the brittleness of the plastic whenever you're taking this stuff apart. Real minor, not anything you really need to worry about. It could actually stay like that, but you probably have to replace it. You see it's cracked here, this piece and this whole under housing here, because that's where this actually locks into. Also on this vehicle, the oil filter housing gasket is leaking, which is relatively common unfortunately, and the belt is actually walking off the tensioner, and that's due to a failed tensioner. And you can see the oil running down along this way. When it gets onto the belts, it can actually make the belt separate, and I've seen the belts come apart and actually get sucked into the front main seal, chew it up, and the belt material can even get into the engine and into the oil pickup. So it's something definitely that should be done as soon as possible if you have leaks like this. First thing we need to do is remove the paneling from the back here, and I have to take the microfilter, which is some 8mm screws. Six of those screws, and then this housing comes off. I always like to clean out any leaves that are here. You don't want them to get into the blower. This housing, or this wiring connection, just give it a yank out. And this is the pieces that hold it in, and they just slide in. So I have to lower that. Now down under that is another harness. This one you can see is broken, but they actually slide in up top too. So you can either slide them out or you can open them up by just separating the plastic around these clips right here, which is going to open up the harness. We're going to take that off anyways for better access. See, that one's actually locked. So I find it better just to pop these open like this so that you can pull the harness out. Have to take these side panels off. So you do have a sniff sensor here. You can just unplug it, and these are just press fit on this wiring. Move that out of the way. There's a tab to lift here and here. Same thing on the opposite side. Somebody's cracked that already. And this is an accessory harness. We do have to loosen that up. That would be for an alarm switch if the vehicle had an alarm. Just going to put that to the side. Two 8mm, one here, and one on the opposite side. and those actually have some different threads than the microfilter. So put them aside, separate. So a little rubber tab that you can push back here and on this side. And this will lift right out. And you can see that there's that harness I took off that would have stayed attached, which I can reroute again after. It's all about space doing this repair, so I'm going to actually open up this plastic housing here. You just lift up on these tabs to separate, it's like a clamshell. Pull this wiring out. And take this out of the way too. Just that little bit is what you need also to get that valve cover off. Have to remove this brace here. So you twist this 90 degrees to access, I think that's a E18, and this one here is an E14. We need to remove that brace to open this area up right here. Take that cap off. This is the E18. Actually, you can leave it partially in, because that side's open over there. And then take this one off as well. Jeez, that's tight. Slide that out. You can see it has like the hook or the U shape on the end that slides in. There's like a little port right here. Now make sure this cap's on so you don't short anything out, but you have to take both sides off because we need to take, there's a little piece under here held in by some 10 millimeters. We need to take that off as well. Take these tension struts out, put them aside. Now under here, this is where those tension struts slide in, and this is held in by some 10 millimeters. We also have to take this seal off around the bottom of this cowl, which this just kind of pulls right off, like so. And you can see these a little bit better. Looks like there's 3 of them. Let's pop those off next. This just pulls right out. See that a little bit better? How those 2 pieces go through there. Put that aside. And take the vanity cover off next. So you have 2 in the front. This is a 5 millimeter Allen. There should be one down in this corner, but somebody's left it out. A lot of techs actually leave that out so that you can actually take the cover off easier in the future. You don't really need it. I always put it back, but whoever was in here before me has left it out. Now on the front of the valve cover, this is the eccentric shaft sensor right here. You can see actually the seal has been leaking, and there's oil all the way down inside the wells here a little bit, and also the VVT gasket's been leaking, and also the cap looks like that's been leaking too. So my recommendation for the owner of this BMW was to replace these items because I've seen it before. So we have our eccentric shaft sensor, a cap, some new sleeves, and a brand new valve cover. I do a valve cover because quite often the valve covers become brittle and they crack, and you can actually see sometimes a crack down either in this corner where there's a lot of oil or right up along here on the top. So if you have 80,000 and above, I'd recommend doing the valve cover complete, because it's only a matter of time before it's going to fail, or the internal crankcase could fail, like on the other X3 video that I've made. Let's get to some tips. Okay, now this is the E-box where the DME is, and you can see underneath this hose, or sorry, this wire is this plastic tab that sticks out right here. You can't clear this piece right here with that plastic tab there. So you can see it's just a holder for a hydraulic line. It's probably a brake line going to the back. But you can trim just a little bit off of this with some dikes. And you're not damaging that clip, you're just taking maybe 3 or 4 millimeters off, and that's all you need to lift this valve cover past that without it catching. I can see little marks here where somebody struggled trying to get this off, maybe at a later time, or earlier time rather. Now in here, down inside here, there's, let's get my light in there, a 10 millimeter screw right there, and it is on a stud, so you don't have to take it all the way out. You just have to unscrew it towards the top and then give that a yank up, and it lifts this panel up, and you actually pull the panel back and put it on top of the stud, and that lifts this whole area up in this back corner, because this is the hardest part about doing this repair, is you don't want to roll the gasket and you need as much space as possible. We're also going to open up the E-box to just lift up this wiring up out of our way a little bit, and it's going to give us just enough room to put this valve cover in a little bit easier. Let's start with the E-box cover. You can see here there's a lock and unlock. Slide it forward to the unlock position. There's one back here too. Lock and unlock. Slide it back to the unlock position. You may have to lift up there's like a little plastic tab, but this one's fatigued enough that it just slid. And then in the front here, you have clips on the side, and that lifts up. Just put your finger on the sides, find that clip, and this piece lifts up. And this is how you access the E-box. We got one more in the back here, that same style as the front. Okay, pop those all free, and this E-box will lift out with 2 hands. Okay, just like that. Put that aside. Now we're just going to lift up the harness out of its slide locations. And actually this is part of this harness, so that'll come up easier when we loosen that. You can see that gives you that needed space to actually finagle this valve cover in. Now you need a deep socket on a swivel to get to that 10 in here. You don't want to take it all the way off, you just want to loosen it up towards the top, or just so it's loose. Actually, that's pretty good right there. Alright. Then I'm going to pull this back. See, this panel comes back here, especially because it's not held with the centerpiece, and put it on top. And this whole piece here now lifts up, so you have room again for that valve cover removal. Alright, here's that other trick. With some dikes, you're going to trim a little bit of plastic off this holder right here. And like I said, it only needs a few millimeters, so that should do it. Just like that. If you want, you can just put a bungee up to the strut or the shock for the hood, and that lifts it up, lifts up this back wiring. And I just noticed that somebody else has been in here. This is part of the valve cover, and this is actually broken, and somebody's epoxied that back in. So actually, that wasn't even epoxied very well. That would have been an air leak right there. So I got to get this piece off. Thankfully, this comes as part of a new valve cover. Oops. Sorry. Alright, gonna pop that off. Thankfully that came apart separate. Not every vehicle is gonna have this vacuum line here, so I'm just gonna put that aside. On the new valve cover, it actually comes with a little cap that covers that if you don't have it. If you do have the vacuum line, like on this N51, you take that cap off and put your vacuum line on. Now this vehicle is also an N51, so that means it does have secondary air. On the X3s I've done videos on it, they have not had secondary air. Here's the non-return valve and my piping. This can be very brittle too, so have to be careful when this is removed so it doesn't crack. It can crack, so it may need to be replaced. Hopefully I can get that off without breaking it, and remove this non-return valve as well. And I think I might do that next. Now the better place to disconnect this is actually back here by the actual pump. This is the pump for the secondary air, and it's a press tab on each side, and if you work it free, you can carefully, by pressing each side and wiggling it, you can pop it free and then gently work it off. So I'm just going to pop that down, and now down, it's going to be hard to see, so I'm probably just going to do it. There's some 10mm two studs and the nuts on top, so I'm going to have to take those off. I'm not going to touch this connection here. I'm going to leave that attached because this is where it tends to pop off once you separate that connection. So down in here are the two. Don't confuse it for the ground strap. There's a ground strap that runs along to the side. This is an important ground strap. Don't forget to leave that attached if you do take it off, or these grounds here, which could lead to a DME failure and some really weird problems. But you're going to need a deep socket on a swivel, and take these off and just be careful not to drop them. Alright, both of those are loose, so I can go ahead and take the secondary air valve out all in one piece. This runs off of air pressure to open from this pipe, and then there's a valve in here, so if your throughput is too low, it could be this valve, or the pump can't put out enough volume. And you can see here, you know, it's been leaking oil for a bit, so there's some oil down there. On this particular vehicle, you do need that gasket, so I always like to clean that up and replace that gasket right there too on the N51. Next steps are going to be removing the wiring, the harnesses or connectors for the oxygen sensors. These just pop out of this little housing. I like to put tape on the same connector because these can be mixed up. Just has a press tab on them. These just slide in this housing, and then this wiring goes this way. Unclip it from around the perimeter. Get this guy off. Take the whole plastic piece off. Just this one doesn't want to come up. Come on. There we go. Press tab. There we go. Move that out of the way. Next, we're going to take the wiring off for the injectors and this ground. And here's the eccentric shaft. This actually just pops off. And coils, these lift up and slide out. And right here you have an 8mm. And if you come down here, there's another 8mm here that has to come off. Take those ground 8mm off next. Get all this wiring out of our way. Okay, it's going to free up these two grounds. Get these coils out of the way. Lift and slide. And here's a trick. Take a screwdriver, put the caps up, and lift straight up to remove these coils. They can be pretty tight. And that makes short work of it. Alright, I'm going to take the remainder off. Once that's done, we have to loosen the harness here where this is all attached. Where this piece comes across the valve cover, right down here, there's two little tabs. Right there and one on the other side. You have to pry these back to free up this harness here. And you can see here, there's these clips, which actually also, these aren't doing a good job at locking, but you can see here, there's the locking tab. So you can press these back to release. Actually, if you usually just give them a little bit of a gentle pull, those come free. But this one here, you definitely have to pry each side to get that out. So just with that flathead screwdriver, that little one I was using for the coils, I went ahead and pop that off there, and that frees this wiring here up. Now, it's still going to be tight because we do have to take this harness off here to pull this back, and we're going to do that next. Going to unplug the oil pressure switch. There's just a push tab here that unplugs, and then this way here is another push tab for another plug. Just keep note of routing. You really can't mix these up. This goes along this way to the Vanos solenoid, so I think we can leave that because we're going to fold it this way. Alright, need to remove the injector harness. There's a trick to this also. Let's see if I can zoom in to the point where you can see this better. That's the connector for the injector. You can see that tab right, let's see if I can get my finger in there, right here. We have to push those aside, and we have to do that on the full length to get this off. So I'm going to try to do this where you can see what I'm doing. With a 90-degree pick, I'm just going to catch the end and slide it over. You hear that little click. I want to put it on the side. And same thing, hopefully you can see this, my hand is not in the way. Catch it and push it to the side. If you put a little bit of upward pressure at the same time, you can actually lift it free. And now you have to do that on the full length on the rest of these as well to unlock this harness. Alright, this is a little time consuming, but so you can see the process. And you got to be careful not to lose these. we go, got two. So if you get one side off, and the other side, you push it back to release it with some upward pressure, pops free. I've already gotten, I thought all of them, but it's like the back one popped on again. Now as soon as you get these free, I like to pop these back into place. They just push and clip right back into place so you don't lose them. Let me get that back one. Okay. Lift that off and make sure I put these back into place. What's nice about these clips is when we're done, we just push this on and it's locked into place. But now I can pull this whole thing back. Oh, gotta unplug my VVT motor. Make sure you can see that. You know, this is all to give yourself enough room to do this repair. There's my VVT motor. You can see I can pull this back now. So what I'm gonna do is, here's my jump terminal here. Alright, we have to watch out, make sure this cap is on. If you ground out anything against this jump terminal here, you'll pop a power supply unit on top of the battery. It's like a square box on top of the battery, and you have to replace it because the fuse is not replaceable separate. So make sure that cap's on. I'm going to take some zip ties. I'm going to zip tie this right over so that I have enough room. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pop this coolant line off too right there, because that's going to be in the way. So I'm going to open my cap to make sure I don't have any pressure. And I can go ahead and close the cap, and that's going to hopefully hold most of my coolant in place, although this is just a bleed spot anyway, so or return. So lift up on that tab, wiggle that off. It should come free. There we go. Pop that back down and put that aside. Might lose a little bit of coolant, but no big deal. And with this tied up out of the way, that should give me some room. I think I want to tuck it down. Yeah, I think up like this. I might leave it loose while I'm taking those bolts out around the valve cover. Alright, next I'm going to do the crankcase vent line right back here. And this is also one of those press tabs where you press it on both sides. There's a tab here and a tab underneath that is a locking tab. You have to very carefully pry up one side. You do the bottom first, it'll pop just a little bit, wiggle it back, and then pop the front and then slide that back. And be gentle with it because these can crack, they're very brittle. Alright, that was actually a real pain. This one here didn't want to come free. So hopefully that's good. I mean, if you end up cracking it, you do need to replace it. This would run down under the intake, so you might have to pull the intake out to replace that. But we just want to move that out of the way. Put a zip tie here. Hook it around the battery post. Just snug it up. And that will pull my harness back. Got that lifted up there. There we go. Alright, valvetronic motor time. I'm going to take a 4mm Allen, put it into the end here. There's a access hole, and if I turn it this way I can feel it's tight. If I turn this way it actually feels loose, and I'm basically walking off the valvetronic tension. And just do that for a bit. It's gonna turn the valvetronic so that this has less tension when we remove it. Okay. Next I'm going to do that little bottom E-Torx, which is an E8. And you do need to have a low profile socket for this. And a swivel helps. And this is where it attaches to the valve cover on the bottom. Just notice there's oil in this eccentric shaft sensor too, which is indicative of the failure, but I mean this one was really bad. The vehicle wouldn't even run right. Okay, same thing on the inside of the seal. We have two more E8s. Gonna loosen this one up a bit. And then switch and loosen up the other one a bit. Basically walk the valvetronic motor out a little bit at a time. So if there is any tension, it's going to come out a little bit more gentle. Because there is a lot of spring tension on that eccentric shaft. See there, I left it so that the screws kind of caught it, gave it a little wiggle, and it backed out under a little bit of tension. Feels good, so I'm going to go ahead and take this one off. And this one over here. Goes. And here's our valvetronic motor. Alright, that's where we're at so far. This is where the valvetronic motor was. You can see the eccentric shaft gears right there. And I just want to note that some of these bolts you have to save if you are replacing the valve cover, which comes with new bolts that are captured. You need to save the center one here, and you need to save, there's two for this bracket. And if we look on this valve cover, we can see encapsulated one here, missing one here. There's that center one. That one's in place. And on the bottom here you have two missing ones here. So you do need to save those and put them aside for when we put this valve cover back on. Okay, I'm going to take the three off from the center first. You do need a deep 10 because this has the stud on it for the ground. And that is a captured one. But if you want, give it a wiggle, you can actually pull these out. Sometimes it's easier to take the valve cover off with them out. Oh, that one doesn't want to come out, so we'll just leave it. That's the one that we have to save. Take that one out. You can see the oil on it from the oil leaks. And that leak is actually from the seal right here, which is replaceable separate. You have two Torxes here. And you can actually take the seal off and just replace that seal if your valve cover is good. Those are those three center ones, and I'm going to put this one aside. Next is E10s, E-Torques, and that's going to be around the entire perimeter of the valve cover. So just start and work your way all the way around. Remember, you have to save those two down here. And you're just going to free these up. If you want, you can go ahead and yank them out and throw them in a pile. It does kind of help it from not getting caught, especially when you're going to be fighting an old gasket, which is going to be stuck to everything also. I'm going to go ahead and work around and take all these out. I'm not going to record me doing it, you know, just so you can watch me take them all out. Save a little bit of time here. Let me just mention that a swivel socket, even if it's a 1/4 inch E10, is really a must. You can see I'm down in this back corner. I'm all the way up top here, so I'm going to access it. But without a swivel, to do a straight shot would be pretty difficult. So it's nice to have a straight shot and a swivel for this job, or else it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Right, with all of those loose around the perimeter, you can use something to try to crack this valve cover free. So it can usually be pretty stuck. Let's see if I can get that started. What works good is give it a bit of a tap. Help start to break it free. Should lift off just like that. If you have more tension after you give it that tap with the backside of a screwdriver, just to break that tension free from that gasket, you might have forgotten a hold down screw, so just double check them all. Well, it looks like this one came free. Alright, let's see if all these tricks worked in order to get this out. This is where you'd get caught in this corner. I'm already up above the eccentric shaft sensor here. The gasket can fight you too, but you're going to be able to come up. Now look in this corner so you can see that. Here, let me get in closer for that. There's that corner where you take that little bit of plastic off. And you can see I have to lift up pretty much straight up to get this out. And it clears that. This is where it usually hits, right in that corner. So you got to come up and to the side. Back out so you can see. Up and to the side. And that's how you get that out. You have to give yourself a little bit of an up there. And it's out. That's the hardest part, I think. Well, now I take that back. Putting it back in is the hardest part, because you don't want to roll the gasket. Pop these sleeves off. I'm going to put these on after the valve cover's on, because it's easier. These are one-time use, so you should be replacing them every time you take the valve cover off. Besides the oil leaks, this is the real culprit here for making this vehicle not run right, is the eccentric shaft sensor, oil in it, and it's not giving the correct value, so the intake valves can't reach the correct position. You have an access hole here for one of these 10mm screws that hold this down, and you have two on top. They come captured, so if you back them out, you should be able to finagle this out without having to worry about dropping them inside. Still a good idea to put something down in case your socket falls off or whatever, so you don't lose anything inside the engine. That would not be a very good day. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this now. Okay, I'm going to back that off. There's a trick here too. I'm going to screw it back in once I get the top loose. And I'm going to use a ratchet wrench for the top. But I have to be careful if I go out too far, it'll actually get caught and I won't be able to slide it back out. So once they're loose, I can go ahead and spin them slowly to back these off. Gonna do that now. Okay, when they're all backed off enough, obviously it's loose, you go to take it out and you're like, oh man, it doesn't want to come out. What's going on? It's that bottom one that holds you in place. So go back in, and actually, without it being installed, tighten it back up. Not into the housing, just onto the sensor itself. So make sure you're backed away, tighten that bottom one up, and once you get it to a certain point, I'm pretty sure you can sneak this out. A little bit more. Alright, so cocked it to the side and I screwed it in, and when I get this out, see how I can finagle that out? I'll show you. See, I've actually left these two at the same location, but this bottom one I actually screwed in into the housing on the eccentric shaft sensor. When it's close to bottoming out, this is the part that holds you up on the chain guide, and you can actually slide it right past it. So obviously, if we did it that way, the next trick is going to be to take our new eccentric shaft sensor and screw that in. Bottom it out. And you can feed it through that hole there, but your chance of dropping it is a little bit higher. So, I mean, this way there's no chance of dropping it. It's a little bit more steps, but okay. And obviously we have to unscrew it once it's in there. Gonna get it caught on at least one tooth so I can bring it back out. And hopefully that will drop right in. Yeah. Look at that, perfect. So now that I'm there, I'm going to go through this access hole and I'm going to back that screw out. If you're wondering how far to back it out, basically you're just going to match it up. So I've basically, if you're looking down this way here, here's my sensor, here's my top screw, and my bottom one's, of course, it's a little difficult to see, is down the bottom, but you can actually see in there if you look from this angle, and you can basically line them up so that you can make it flush again, so that you can go ahead and line it up and bolt that down. Okay, that's lined up. I'll get my bottom one started first. I'm not going to tighten it down all the way. I'm going to leave it a little loose so that I can do the top. I'm not going to torture you with me having to tighten these slowly by hand like this, a little bit at a time until I can get my ratchet wrench in there. But this is basically how you do it from this point. You need an open end wrench, 10mm, and just start screwing them in and snug them up. Okay, snug them down. Don't forget that bottom one. So 1, 2, 3, done. Now I need to clean up the peripheral for my valve cover installation. I'm going to use a rag, wipe everything clean, and then use a little bit of Scotch-Brite, and then go over the whole thing with a little bit of brake clean. Let me show you what I mean. Take the rag, and wipe the area. Now you do have to go around the whole thing. Take your little bit of Scotch-Brite, and I like to get this residual gasket all off, and just go over it gently with the Scotch-Brite, which does a really good job. This is 3M Scotch-Brite. And then take a rag and some brake clean and just do a little bit on the rag itself and go over the area to remove any oil residue. And you're going to do that around the entire peripheral so it's nice and clean. And don't forget the center, you have to do it in here as well. And it's the same procedure. I want to mention something else important. A lot of these holes are actually blind holes, which means they can hold fluid. Like this one here is full of oil from when the valve cover came off. If you went and installed a bolt in that hole and didn't blow the oil out, you could potentially cause a crack because you can't compress a fluid. So something's going to give. So you either need to get in there with something to soak up the oil or use a blowgun, which is what I'm going to do with a rag and blow out each hole. And I do this before I do the final weight down of the valve cover, because there's a chance I'm going to be blowing oil everywhere. Now, not all of them are blind holes. I think the top ones are open, but it's just good to hit every single one just to be safe, and the center ones absolutely need to be done. Also, don't forget to don't overlook the surface here. This is also a sealing surface, and that's a blind plug there for the VVT motor. So same thing as you do on the bottom. Clean that. Scotch-Brite it and wipe it down so you have a nice sealing surface there as well. Now I always like to take a quick peek, make sure none of my rocker arms have fallen off. You know, very, very rarely when you take that eccentric shaft sensor out, I've had one actually kick off. So you just want to take a peek. All of these look fine. They're all in place on both the intake and the exhaust. Throw my secondary air gasket on. I zip tied that crankcase vent hose up top and out of my way, and hopefully this is going to be open enough for me here, because I have to go in at an angle, rotate it and drop it in without rolling the gasket. So this is the difficult part right here. And watch out for your eccentric shaft sensor as well. Alright, and I pushed on the gasket to make sure it felt nice and secure. Gotta get it over the hump in the back without pulling it. Whew. Look at that. And then right here, careful maneuvering that over the eccentric shaft sensor. I like to just put my hand around the perimeter before it's all the way down, and just feel the gasket to make sure it's not rolled. It feels really, really good. It's not rolled. So now I got to line up that eccentric shaft. Strap on the rest of the way. Go. You know what it is, these were holding me up in the back. I had to lift them up a little bit and wiggle and jiggle, and then right around here make sure that that seal goes around that eccentric shaft sensor without damaging it. See right here. Now this seal is replaceable separate, the whole gasket's replaceable separate, this seal is replaceable separate, but you might already have a compromised valve cover. So, my opinion, this is the best way to do it. Also, the gasket stays on better, and you can use some kind of like a star tack to almost glue the gasket on if you are going to be replacing it. And you can see how, you know, doing these tricks here gives you the room you need. Otherwise, it's crazy tight to get back there and get this valve cover on. Next step is just to start all your bolts to make sure you don't cross thread any of them. So you should start them all by hand. Don't forget the ones that you have to install in the center. That's this one here for the center. And the two E-Torxes for down along here on this bracket. Just throw the new oil filter cap on. It actually just rests right into place. There we go. Just have to twist it on and you're good to go. Alright, everything's snug for the most part, at least caught. I'm going to start with the center, and it's 10 Newton meters basically for everything. 10, 10, 10, and then that's the 3 in the center. Now I got to do my peripheral. So all of these are 10 Newton meters also, and just go around and snug them down the rest of the way. And I don't think there was a specific torque sequence, but I do like to start from the center and work my way here, here, until I do each side, working from the center out. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one, work my way, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, the back 2, and then the front. Alright, with everything torqued down, you got to put the sleeves in now. Just slide them in, take like a screwdriver or tool, and give them a little bit of a push until you hear them lock in. go. And you can see obviously the retaining ring goes towards the bottom. And just slide the other ones in. Give them a little push down so they lock in. Okay, just tap them all down. Okay, I'm going to do the VVT motor next, which I cleaned this surface as well. Nice and go there, and then it fits into a little slot. Okay, with that in place, I'm going to get my E8 started. Alright, gotta give it a little bit of a wiggle. Make sure these line up right. I'm just gonna bring this one in. Just to hold everything in place. And opposite side. And again, don't snug them down quite yet. Or tighten them up. I mean, you can have them somewhat snug. But you want to get all three in first. And I got that other little one from underneath. Okay. I believe this is probably about the same as like 10 Newton meters. Alright, I'm not going to snug the bottom one up first. I'm going to tighten these two first, which makes sure my motor's pulled forward all the way before I tighten that bottom one, or else it won't be seated properly. So two top ones first. Need a smaller extension. Okay. And there's that little one. And I'm going to tighten this one up last. The socket decided to stay. See if I get that out. Right, gonna start running my wiring. There's my wiring for my O2 sensors. I'm gonna put those in place as they sit back here. And I'm gonna cut this free. Okay, I'm just going to take the harness and lay everything in place. slide these clips back on that I had talked about earlier. And I can slide my DME wiring back into, start taking this stuff off. And I'll lock down my injector harness. Check all your clips, make sure they're in place. Line them up. Give them a push down and they'll lock right in. Just the routing for the oxygen sensor wiring. Gonna hook that crankcase vent hose. Lock that into place. Don't want to forget that would be a big air leak. Okay. Could go ahead and I can lock these on now. Just slide in. That goes on that side. There we go. Alright, here's my sensor here. And you have your sensor in the front. So that's all back together there. You want to slide all of your DME connections on and make sure that they're located correctly in the housings, or else you don't want water to get into your e-box. And there's actually slots where these fit and slide in. Let me do a quick close-up so you can see how this slides in. So you need a gasket in the front. This one goes into that slot and then they slide in like so. And they should slide in nice and easy. You can see how they bottom out. Okay, so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the valvetronic motor plug, and if I want I could engage the worm gear a little bit just by using that Allen. When I cycle the key, this should do a calibration run. Cycle it on, don't start, cycle it off, and it's going to do a calibration run. I'm going to close up the e-box. Okay, e-box cover. Make sure your grommets are in place and the wiring. Just going to drop this on. It's somewhat of a tight fit. Should drop on. And when you're in the right spot, you can lock it down. You can see if you're in the right spot just by looking here where these locks are. And slide them back to lock them. And then these just push down. That's going to lock the front in place. Same thing back here. That's the e-box cover. Next thing would be to put your grounds on. Not something you want to forget once again. And those are those little 8s. Snug those down. do secondary air valve next, which I clean the bottom of. Finagle that down there. The best access to put those nuts on are through here. Just put your hand in there, and I would just kind of get them started first and then go in with a wobble socket to tighten those up. And that was a 10mm deep socket. Once that's secure, you can run your line back to the pump. Make sure it clips on. While we're here, hook our coolant line up. Make sure you push down on that little locking tab. Next come the coils. Make sure that's opened up. Slide your coil on and lock it down and give them a push in. You actually hear the air come out. Make sure all the way up. Make sure they're locked. And make sure you give them a good push down. Okay, with all the coils in, don't forget if you have the vacuum line, that gets installed on this nipple right here. There's a diaphragm in there. Okay. Don't forget to lock in the eccentric shaft sensor plug. And then you're going to have to take this and put that plastic underneath that stud in there and make sure that's all secured down. You can see right there. Pull that back and get underneath. There it is right there, underneath. Snug that down. Make sure you're seated against your bulkhead right here. Now make sure that this piece here, you're going to push it down and up and in and make sure it's seated against the glass to keep any kind of water out. The water really should flow this way. Up under here, it actually clips underneath. So you kind of pull it back and down. And you can see it's fully seated here along the glass. You don't want it up. Next is that centerpiece that slides in here, if you remember, with the two cross beams. And you're going to have two coarse screws on the outside and one fine screw for the center. This one was the center. That was the fine threaded screw. And then you have, and these are 10s. You have the two coarse thread on the outsides. Snug these down. Okay, then after that, you have that seal along the back, which just pushes into place. Make sure it's fully seated. Have this piece here that held that wiring. So we're going to place that. And this one as well. And remember that this piece was got these two marks on it here to line it up. Keeps wanting to pop out. This is that clamshell piece. Actually hooks on. And then locks into place. Once everything's lined up properly. Okay, that's that piece. Alright, about ready to put the cover on. But let's do a quick double check. Right, connected here. The whole thing is torqued down. Valvetronic motors plugged in. Eccentric shaft plugged in. My grounds are tight. All my coils are installed correctly. Secondary air is all set. Got my piece in the back is attached and locked in. Hopefully that wasn't brittle and cracked on me. Sometimes you can't tell because it cracks further down. E-box cover's on because I'm about ready to put this back piece on too. But before I do that, we'll put the vanity cover on since we're about at that point. Drop that vanity cover on. That vacuum line hooks there. Make sure you don't have anything pinched. And I'm going to put my existing 3, not 4, because that one in the corner was already missing. So you have some time, and I got the heat going in my garage today with a kerosene heater. So it's like 5 degrees out. Not a fun day to be doing something like this unless you have a heated place to go. One day I would like a lift. Maybe one day I'll be able to get one. Just gonna gently snug these down. They don't have to be super tight. They're only holding on a piece of plastic. Okay, here we go. It's starting to look like a regular BMW engine again. Now for this back piece, under here, remember you can either slide this off and install it onto the wiring ahead of time, or make sure these are opened up, just like clips right here. Okay, like so. That one's broken, not by me. And this is going to sit back here. There's that harness. I'm going to go ahead and put that harness in place so this doesn't close on you, because it likes to do that. This just slid off already. So, and then I can lock it shut so it doesn't move on me. Slide back on me. Alright, you can check so you're lined up by your 2 screw holes. There is like a plastic clip, so that slides underneath, and make sure it's fully seated. And then close your clamshell on those, and you can lock these in place. These just slide in place, like so. Actually looks a lot better than how I found it. Get the 2 screws. Now it should be this screw here, but somebody's been in here before and I didn't notice. Somebody's already swapped it with a different style thread, so not sure where I got it from. I think this side, so I'm gonna have to put it back on this side. It will go in, but it's 8mm, not 10. But I always like to put things back where they came from. But this was in another shop before it came to me, which is pretty common. If you don't know where things go, or you're rushing because you're doing it flat rate style, that's when stuff like that happens. Still should tighten down. Let me get the other side with the correct screw. Okay, those are secure. You got to remember to run the wiring again for the sniff sensor. And that just pushes in. There's a couple little clips, like so. And then we have that other plastic piece that goes there. And I routed the wiring on the other side as well. Then you have these covers. And you've got these little rubber things that kind of sit on the side. You just kind of pull those back and they go into the slot on this cover. Put that down. Both sides. And same thing on the car side. A little nub that goes into that back housing too. This piece of rubber here just kind of directs the water to these little drains on the sides. Same thing, this sits like this. This little rubber nub goes in that slot. And then this locks down here. This right here was already cracked. And I got here, but make it as good as we can. This should be also where you get access to do a brake flush. Reservoirs under there. And then your microfilter housing. And your 8mm core screws. Oh man. You know what I forgot? Strut brace. Which you can still sneak in. So hopefully you caught that as you're going back together. You have to put it on the back side, slide right in, and then I caught that central bolt there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side instead of taking the whole thing apart again. Feed that right in and hook it. You can see here, if you get down here, you can actually see where they go. Well, at least I can see them. I can't stuff the camera in there enough. But you can see those two little openings which go to the central bolt right here. And you know you're on if that bolt's moving when you wiggle it. So there's my strut braces. So now put your E-Torxes on. All the way down. All the way down. Then I got my central bolt. To get, and that's up there. Which I didn't take all the way out. So it was easier to hook everything. No big deal. That's what happens when you get tired a little bit. This is pretty tight, the central bolt here. Or you can get a popping noise. That sounds like it's inside the car. It's really not. Snug down your two side ones. These aren't as tight, but pretty snug here. Okay. And the other one as well. Got the cap that needs to go up here. And on and give it a twist. The lock. Now I can put my 8mm screws on for that microfilter. So you got the two here, 2 and 2. Alrighty then. Okay, now from inside the car, put the key in, cycle it on. I just heard the valvetronic motor go click click. Cycle it back off. And then I like to do it again. Click, click. I did it again. I don't know if you could actually pick that up. And should be ready to start it. Now, I'm not surprised the check engine light's on because of the issue that this car already had. So I'm gonna have to clear that out. Seems to be running pretty good though. Much better. Yeah, I wouldn't do that before. Look at my little scanner. Not sure if you can see that. Turn my key on. Okay. (7E8) and (7EC). That's erase codes. All right. Looks good. Alright, so that was the secondary air running. And then it does take a bit for it to drop down. Don't want to fill the garage up with fumes, so I'm going to shut it off now. Awesome.